The sky was already burning when they came to strip her of her name. Lightning crawled sideways through the volcanic clouds, illuminating the broken shape sprawled across the obsidian plain. Every thunderclap echoed against jagged black mountains like distant artillery. The air smelled of sulfur, ash, and something far worse. Abandonment. She heard them before she saw them. The low, disciplined wing beats. Measured. Cold. Official. High above, 3 Imperial dragon cruisers descended through the storm, their armored hulls glowing with containment sigils. They did not rush. They did not hesitate. They had come to finish a decision already made. Kareth of the Ninth Flame, once vanguard of the eastern border, tried to lift her head. Pain exploded down her spine like molten metal. Nothing below her forelegs responded. Her hind legs lay twisted behind her, useless, numb stone attached to a living body. The impact had crushed more than bone. It had severed the fire nerve channels that ran along her spine. Every dragon knew the truth. When those channels were destroyed, flight was gone forever. And a dragon without flight was not a dragon at all. The ships settled in a half-circle around her. Their ramps lowered. No one ran to her. No medic crews. No engineers. No healers. Only council representatives. Tall. Armored. Wings folded tight in ceremonial discipline. At their center stood High Marshal Dovarik. He did not bow. He did not look angry. He looked inconvenienced. Kareth forced air into her lungs. Even breathing scraped. "You came," she rasped, her voice grinding against ash. Dovarik's golden eyes flicked across her motionless lower body. "We came," he said evenly, "to close the matter." The storm cracked again, white light flashing across the plain. She remembered the battle. The ambush. The collapsing orbital gate. She had shielded the civilian transport line. Taken the blast meant for the hatchlings aboard. She remembered the feeling of falling. The ground rising too fast. The sound her spine made when it hit. She waited for acknowledgement. For honor. For gratitude. Dovarik extended a data slate. "The council has reviewed your condition," he said. Her chest tightened. "Due to irreversible paralysis of the posterior nerve lattice, you are hereby relieved of rank, command authority, and title." The word struck harder than the fall. A lesser dragon behind him shifted uncomfortably. Kareth tasted copper. "I held the line," she whispered. "You failed to remain combat viable," Dovarik replied. Lightning flashed again. For a brief moment, his shadow stretched long across her broken body. "Resources cannot be allocated to long-term non-combatants," he continued. "The Empire does not sustain liabilities." Liability. The word carved deeper than any blade. She tried to flare her wings in protest. The left wing responded weakly. The right trembled and collapsed against the ground. Even that effort left her vision swimming. Dovarik signaled to his aides. A small beacon drone detached from one of the ships and hovered beside her. "Exile marker," he said. "This world is unclaimed ash territory. Minimal traffic. You will not interfere with Imperial operations." She stared at him. "You're leaving me here?" "Yes." No hesitation. No malice. Just policy. The storm intensified as if the planet itself rejected the decree. "You will not survive the winter cycle," Dovarik added, almost clinically. "But it is preferable to public display of weakness." Weakness. That was the final verdict. She had burned fleets. She had shattered pirate armadas. She had defended hatcheries. And now she was a lesson in what not to become. The beacon drone anchored into the stone beside her with a metallic click. It began transmitting her status to Imperial records. Decommissioned. The word pulsed in crimson light. Dovarik turned away first. The others followed. Not one of them met her eyes again. The ramps lifted. The ships rose. Their thrusters scattered ash across her scales as they ascended into the storm. Within seconds, they were silhouettes. Within a minute, they were gone. Silence returned to the volcanic plain. Except for the wind. And the faint mechanical hum of the exile beacon. Kareth lay motionless. The pain dulled into a distant, crushing weight. She tried once more to move her hind legs. Nothing. Not even phantom sensation. The truth settled heavier than the ash accumulating along her wings. They had not left her to recover. They had left her to disappear. Hours passed. Or maybe only minutes. Time blurred when survival no longer required planning. The storm slowly drifted eastward, leaving behind a red, fractured sky. Cold crept across the plain. Her fire core dimmed. She closed her eyes. If predators came, she would not feel it. If winter arrived early, she would not fight it. Dragons were not meant to crawl. The Empire was correct about one thing. Without flight. What was she? A faint vibration touched the ground beneath her foreclaws. At first, she thought it was thunder returning. But the rhythm was wrong. Not atmospheric. Mechanical. Small. Irregular. Her eyes opened slowly. On the horizon, beyond the black stone ridges, a single light blinked. Too steady for lightning. Too low for a dragon. Too small for an imperial ship. The vibration grew louder. Closer. Through the drifting ash clouds, a compact cargo vessel emerged, paint-chipped, hull-scorched, engines whining under strain. It was not sleek. It was not armored. It certainly was not dragon-made. It descended cautiously, kicking up spirals of ash as it settled less than 100 meters away. A hatch hissed open. A ramp lowered. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, a figure stepped out. Small. Two-legged. Wrapped in insulated work gear. A helmet visor reflecting the dying red sky. The human stopped at the base of the ramp. Looked up at her. And did not turn away. Kareth exhaled slowly, smoke curling from her nostrils. Of all the ways to die, she had not expected a witness. The human took one careful step forward. Then another. Ash crunched under heavy boots. He stopped just beyond the range of her foreclaws. Silence stretched between them. The exile beacon continued to pulse behind her. Decommissioned. 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 The human tilted his head slightly, studying her broken frame. Then, through external speakers, a calm male voice crackled across the plain. "Well," he said quietly, "that's not how you leave a war hero." And for the first time since the fall, Kareth felt something other than pain. The exile beacon pulsed red against the black stone. Decommissioned. The word echoed in Kareth's mind long after the storm had passed. The human stood before her, small against her ruined body, visor reflecting her cracked scales and the ash drifting between them. He should have been afraid. He wasn't. He removed his helmet. Wind immediately tore at his dark hair, but he ignored it. His face was younger than she expected. Not soft. Not reckless. Just, steady. He looked up at her like she was a problem to solve. Not a corpse waiting to happen. "You're still breathing strong," he said, scanning a handheld device over her flank. "Core temperature stable. That's something." She let out a low rumble. "You are human." "Last I checked." His tone was calm. Dry. No reverence. No mockery. Just fact. "You should leave," she said. Speaking still felt like dragging gravel across broken glass. "This world is not yours." He glanced at the beacon. "Apparently it's not yours either." The bluntness would have enraged her once. Now it only stung because it was true. He circled carefully, staying outside the reach of her forelegs. He examined the impact fractures along her scales. The collapsed spinal ridge. The dead weight of her hindquarters. He crouched near her tail, scanning again. His expression changed. Not disgust. Focus. "That blast severed your posterior nerve lattice," he murmured. "Signals not getting through." She closed her eyes. "You cannot fix it." "Didn't say I could." He stood. "But I don't see infection. And your core reactor's intact." Reactor. Humans used mechanical language for everything. "You misunderstand," she said. "Dragons without flight are removed from service. We do not linger." He looked back at her. "Service to who?" She hesitated. The answer had always been obvious. The Empire. The flame. The continuity. Now the words felt hollow. He walked toward the exile beacon and studied it. "Long-range transmitter," he muttered. "Broadcasting your status." His jaw tightened. "Yeah. That's not staying." Kareth's eyes snapped open. "You touch Imperial property and you invite reprisal." He looked over his shoulder. "They already left you to die." He reached into a tool pouch at his belt. Her muscles tensed. He was small, but humans were unpredictable. She had seen recordings, fragile-looking creatures piloting warships with terrifying precision. He pressed the device against the beacon's casing. A faint hiss. A sharp electrical crack. The red light flickered. Flickered again. Then died. Silence settled across the plain. No more broadcast. No more label. For the first time since the council departed, the air felt different. She stared at the inert device. "You have made yourself an enemy of the Dragon Council." He shrugged lightly. Wouldn't be the first time I annoyed someone important. He returned to stand before her, hands on his hips. My name's Adrian Cole. Independent engineer. Salvage and structural systems. She studied him carefully. Why are you here, Adrian Cole? He glanced toward his ship. Picked up unusual energy readings while passing through. Thought it might be wreckage worth stripping. He met her gaze again. Found you instead. Ash swirled between them. He didn't ask permission. He didn't ask for reward. He just stood there, thinking. You saved civilians, he said finally. She stiffened. You heard the report. Hard not to. Imperial emergency channels are loud when heroes fall. Hero. The word hurt more than liability. Heroes fly, she said flatly. Heroes stand when it matters. Her jaw tightened. I cannot stand. He stepped closer this time, close enough that she could see the tiny lines of exhaustion at the corners of his eyes. You can't send signals to your hind limbs, he corrected. That's different. She let out a slow breath of smoke. You are not a dragon medic. No. You are not Imperial. Nope. You are not obligated. He held her gaze. No. The wind howled across the plain. Cold crept deeper into her scales. You will fail, she said quietly. Probably. The answer surprised her. But failing while trying beats flying away, he added. He walked toward his ship and tapped a control on his wrist. The cargo bay lights flared to life. Mechanical arms unfolded inside. Crates shifted. Equipment racks slid forward. Kareth watched in confusion. You intend to operate on me? She asked. Not operate. He grabbed a heavy case and dragged it down the ramp. Build. He set the case on the ash and opened it. Inside were modular frame components. Alloy struts. Servo joints. Neural interface cables. She stared. You cannot rebuild a dragon. He smiled faintly. Good thing I don't need to. He began scanning her spine again, projecting a holographic skeletal map into the air. I can't repair biological nerve fibers. Not out here. He looked up at her. But I can bypass them. The words hung between them. Bypass. Her heart thudded harder against her ribs. That is impossible. He adjusted the projection, highlighting her damaged lattice. For dragons? Maybe. He pointed to a cluster of still-active neural nodes near her upper spine. These are still firing. She followed his gesture. They control wing articulation. And your forelimbs. He nodded. Which means your brain's still issuing movement commands. They just aren't reaching the back half. Understanding flickered slowly, dangerously. You propose, a machine. An assistive exoskeletal support frame with neural translation. He looked at her hindquarters thoughtfully. Scaled up. A lot. Silence stretched. No dragon had ever worn such a thing. To need assistance was shame. To attach machinery was humiliation. To survive like that. Unthinkable. You would bind me to metal, she said. I'd give you leverage, he corrected. He met her eyes again. You don't have to crawl. The wind died down. The volcanic plain seemed to hold its breath. Kareth searched his face for deception. For pity. For ambition. She found none. Only stubborn resolve. You risk death, she warned. If I lose control. He cut her off gently. You won't. The certainty in his voice was unsettling. How can you know? He picked up a welding torch from the case. Flipped it in his hand. And looked up at her with a calm that did not belong on a world like this. Because you're still fighting. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he set the torch down and rolled his shoulders. All right, Adrian said quietly. Let's see if we can help you stand. The first time she tried to move the machine, it screamed. Not her. The machine. A violent metallic shriek tore across the volcanic plain as servo joints locked under uneven torque. Hydraulic pistons misfired. One reinforced strut twisted half a degree beyond tolerance. And snapped. The mechanical leg buckled sideways. Kareth crashed back into the ash with enough force to crack stone. Adrian barely rolled clear in time. Silence followed. Then the wind. Then the slow hiss of overheating components cooling in open air. Kareth lay there, smoke rising faintly from her nostrils. You see, she said quietly, staring at the dark sky. Dragons were not meant to wear cages. Adrian pushed himself upright, wincing as he checked his shoulder. Good, he muttered. She turned her head slightly. Good. He walked toward the damaged joint, crouching to examine the fracture. Means we're testing the right limits. You nearly died. Yeah. He tapped the cracked servo housing. And now I know this alloy won't handle your full torque output. She watched him in disbelief. You measure survival in metal tolerances. Mostly. He pried open the casing and removed the ruined actuator. I don't expect version 1 to work, he added calmly. Version 1. Dragons trained for centuries before leading fleets. Humans built strength in versions. By the 6th day, the exoskeletal frame no longer looked experimental. It looked formidable. The central spinal brace had been reinforced with triple-layer composite plating. Shock absorption rings lined each artificial joint. Secondary stabilizers extended outward to counterbalance her upper body mass. Adrian had also adjusted the neural interface. Originally, it merely translated movement signals. Now it predicted them. You anticipate motion before I complete the command? Kareth asked. Your brain fires milliseconds before muscle engagement, he replied. I'm using that. He tightened the last stabilizer bolt and stepped back. The machine loomed behind her like a mechanical echo of her former strength. Today we aim for full extension, he said. Her chest tightened. Full extension meant vertical alignment. Standing at her true height. Not half-raised. Not braced awkwardly. Standing. You assume much, she murmured. I assume you're ready. She wasn't sure that was true. But she sent the signal anyway. The neural interface flared blue. This time, there was no violent jolt. The machine responded smoothly, rear limbs locking into position, claws anchoring deep into the volcanic stone. Hydraulics engaged in controlled sequence. Rear left. Rear right. Stabilizers compensating microtilts. Her forelimbs pressed down. She felt the shift instantly, weight redistributing not into numb emptiness, but into reinforced support. Her body rose. Higher than before. The world tilted, then steadied. Ash cascaded from her wings as her torso lifted fully off the ground. The machine hummed, not straining, but working. Her heart thundered. Adrian stood several meters away, eyes locked on diagnostic projections hovering before him. Torque levels stable, he whispered. She continued rising. Higher. Higher. Until her spine aligned vertically. Fully. Her neck extended instinctively, adjusting to altitude she had not felt since the fall. The volcanic plain looked different from this height. Smaller. Manageable. The wind struck her chest and parted around her scales instead of pressing her into the ground. She was shaking. But she was upright. Fully upright. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Kareth shifted her weight deliberately. The machine responded. One mechanical hind claw lifted slightly. Then planted forward. A single step. The ground trembled under the impact. Adrian's breath caught. You just walked. She froze. The word echoed louder than any roar. Walked. Not dragged. Not balanced in place. Moved. She tested again. Another step. Smoother this time. The gyros adjusted mid-motion. Servo muscle bundles flexed with increasing fluidity. She began to understand the rhythm, how to blend organic motion with mechanical response. Her wings flared instinctively for balance. The stabilizers compensated. A third step. A fourth. The machine no longer sounded strained. It sounded synchronized. Adrian lowered his console slowly. You're adapting faster than projected. I have commanded battle formations mid-combat, she replied, voice steadier now. Adapting to metal is not beyond me. A faint smile touched his face. That's what I was hoping. She continued forward, each step more confident than the last. Ash scattered beneath reinforced claws. For the first time since her exile, she was not staring at the sky from the ground. She was looking across the horizon. Her breathing deepened. Speed calibration, Adrian said softly. Let's test controlled acceleration. You push aggressively. He met her gaze. You didn't survive a border collapse to practice standing still. She studied him for a long moment. Then she leaned slightly forward. Sent a stronger neural command. The machine reacted instantly, rear limbs driving with more force. She moved faster. Not a run. But purposeful motion. The wind tore past her scales. A sound escaped her throat before she could stop it. Not pain. Not strain. A low, rising rumble of something dangerously close to exhilaration. She halted abruptly. The stabilizers locked. No collapse. No buckle. No scream of failing metal. Just stillness. She stood tall against the dying light of the volcanic sun. Her shadow stretched across kilometers of black stone. Adrian approached slowly, as if nearing a newly awakened titan. "Well?" he asked. Kerith looked down at him. The Empire had labeled her broken. Unfit. Liability. Yet here she stood, supported not by dragon tradition, not by council decree, but by human stubbornness and forged steel. "You have done the unthinkable," she said quietly. He shook his head. "No." He glanced at the exoskeletal frame, then back at her. "You did." She considered that. Perhaps that was the difference. Dragons measured worth by purity of strength. Humans measured it by what could be rebuilt. The wind shifted. High above, clouds parted briefly. For the first time in days, she could see open sky. She flexed her wings carefully. The machine compensated. Balance held. A thought crept into her mind, dangerous and intoxicating. Standing was not the end. It was the beginning. She lowered her head slightly toward Adrian. "This machine," she said. "It can endure vertical force." He followed her gaze upward. His expression changed slowly. "You're not thinking." She spread her wings wider. Ash spiraled outward in a widening circle. "I have stood long enough." The stabilizers whined softly in anticipation. Adrian exhaled once. Then nodded. "Okay," he said quietly. "Let's see if we can make you fly." The first jump shattered half the valley. Kerith drove her mechanical hind claws into volcanic stone and launched. Not a true flight. Not yet. But enough force to leave the ground. The exoskeletal frame screamed under vertical load as reinforced pistons fired in sequence. Stabilizers flared blue. Gyros spun violently to counter wing imbalance. For 3 glorious seconds. She was airborne. Wind roared across her scales. Then gravity reclaimed her. She landed hard, but not broken. The machine absorbed the shock with a thunderous metallic impact that cracked the plane beneath her. Adrian was already running diagnostics before the dust settled. "Structural integrity at 87%, he called out. "We can work with that." Kerith's heart pounded like it had before battle. "I left the ground," she murmured. "Yeah," he replied, grinning. "You did." They refined the frame for 12 more days. Adrian reinforced the spinal brace with lead composite plating. Added thrust assist microjets along the rear stabilizers to compensate for deadweight drag. Installed adaptive balance software to respond to rapid wing angle shifts. Kerith trained relentlessly. Small jumps became sustained glides. Glides became controlled descents. Then, one dusk beneath a blood-red sky. She did not come down immediately. She climbed. The mechanical limbs extended mid-air, adjusting for lift distribution. The machine and muscle moved as one system. For the first time since her exile, Kerith of the Ninth Flame flew. Not perfectly. Not effortlessly. But undeniably. She hovered above the volcanic plain, wings beating powerfully as the exoskeletal frame compensated beneath her. Adrian stood below, looking impossibly small. "You're stable," he shouted. She circled once overhead, feeling the air curl beneath her scales. The Empire had decided flight defined worth. They were about to learn something else. The dragon capital did not expect her silhouette on the horizon. The city of Pyrothar rose from molten rivers and black stone spires, its towers carved from ancient volcanic pillars. Patrol dragons circled high above in disciplined arcs. One of them froze mid-flight. Unidentified approach vector, the sentry transmitted. The shape grew clearer against the burning sky. Massive wings. Imperial scale markings. And metal. "Impossible," another guard whispered. The alarm spread rapidly through the capital's defensive grid. Council chambers halted mid-session. High Marshal Dovarek stepped onto the observation balcony, eyes narrowing as the figure descended toward the central plaza. The crowd gathered below parted instinctively. Kerith landed with deliberate control. Mechanical claws struck stone in perfect synchronization. No stumble. No collapse. The ground trembled under her weight. Silence consumed the plaza. Hundreds of dragons stared. Some in shock. Some in disbelief. Some in something dangerously close to shame. Her mechanical frame gleamed beneath the city's lava-lit towers, a fusion of forged alloy and dragon strength. Dovarek descended slowly from the balcony, wings extended in rigid authority. "You defy council decree," he said coldly. Kerith lowered her head slightly, not in submission, but in measured regard. "You decreed I was no longer viable," she replied evenly. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Dovarek's gaze flicked to the exoskeletal frame. You return bound to machinery. I return standing. The words echoed across the plaza. The High Marshal stiffened. This is artificial enhancement, he said sharply. Unauthorized augmentation. It is adaptation. Kareth stepped forward. The mechanical limbs moved smoothly across the ancient stone. You left me to disappear, she continued. Yet here I stand before you. Dovarek's voice hardened. Dragons do not rely on external crutches. Dragons defend their own, she countered. The accusation struck deeper than flame. Eyes across the plaza shifted. Veterans remembered the battle reports. The civilians she shielded. The blast she absorbed. One younger dragon stepped forward hesitantly. You were declared decommissioned, he said quietly. Kareth turned toward him. Was I? She flexed her wings. The mechanical stabilizers adjusted flawlessly. A low hum resonated from the reinforced frame. I am not less dragon, she said, voice carrying across the plaza. I am more resilient. High Marshal Dovarek's jaw tightened. Who constructed this? There it was. The question beneath the outrage. Not how. Not why. Who? Kareth's golden eyes shifted toward the distant sky beyond the capital. A small human vessel hovered far beyond defensive range. Watching. He did, she said calmly. A ripple of disbelief moved through the gathered dragons. A human? Dovarek scoffed. You submit your dignity to alien engineering. I accepted help, she corrected. She stepped closer. The mechanical limbs adjusted height slightly, allowing her to stand at full, commanding posture. You saw broken, she said quietly. He saw potential. The words settled heavily. Dovarek's wings flared in restrained anger. This sets dangerous precedent. Yes, Kareth agreed. It does. Silence deepened. Then something unexpected happened. A dragon from the outer ring of the crowd limped forward. An older veteran. One wing permanently scarred from plasma burns. He bowed his head slightly toward Kareth. You stand, he said softly. She met his gaze. Yes. The veteran looked at the mechanical frame. Then back at her. Then you are not decommissioned. A murmur of agreement spread outward like a rising tide. Dovarek felt the shift immediately. Authority built on tradition wavered under visible proof. Kareth did not roar. She did not threaten. She did not demand. She simply stood there. Unbroken. The Empire had abandoned her to avoid displaying weakness. Instead, she returned displaying evolution. She turned her gaze back to the High Marshal. You fear what this represents, she said calmly. Dovarek held her stare. And what is that? That strength does not end when the body falters. The plaza remained utterly silent. Far above, the small human ship began to drift away from orbit. Adrian had no intention of landing. No intention of claiming credit. This was not his stage. Kareth watched the vessel for a brief moment before addressing the crowd once more. The Empire must decide, she said evenly, whether perfection is worth more than perseverance. The mechanical limbs hummed softly beneath her. Alive with possibility. She did not ask for reinstatement. She did not beg recognition. She simply turned toward the open sky. The stabilizers locked. The thrust assist ignited. Wings spread wide against the molten horizon. And with a controlled, thunderous launch, Kareth rose above the dragon capital. Not as liability. Not as exile. But as something the Empire had never prepared for. A dragon who refused to disappear. And now every dragon watching understood. The impossible had already happened. They had just seen it land. The Empire did not summon her. She summoned them. 3 days after her return, a signal pulsed across every council channel in Pyrathar. All outcasts. All injured. All decommissioned. Come to the Eastern Plateau. No threats. No demands. Just coordinates. The council debated blocking the transmission. High Marshal Dovarek argued containment. Several elders warned of destabilization. But none of them moved to stop it. Because every dragon in the capital had seen her stand. And something irreversible had shifted. The Eastern Plateau had once been a training ground for young flyers. Now it became something else. They arrived cautiously at first. A one-winged courier. A veteran missing an eye. A hatchling with malformed hind claws. A flame breather whose internal furnace no longer ignited properly. They stood at the edges of the plateau, unsure whether they were witnessing rebellion or redemption. Then Kerith landed. Not with spectacle. Not with force. With control. Her mechanical limbs absorbed the descent smoothly, claws anchoring into the basalt with quiet authority. The murmurs stilled. She looked across them. Every scar. Every limp. Every lowered gaze. I was told I was finished, she began, her voice steady and resonant. Several heads lifted. I was told strength meant flawlessness. Her mechanical frame hummed faintly in the wind. I was wrong. Silence held the plateau. You were not discarded because you lack strength, she continued. You were discarded because the Empire lacks imagination. A ripple of tension moved through the gathered dragons. Not anger. Recognition. She turned slightly, revealing the full exoskeletal frame supporting her. This, she said, is not shame. She lifted one reinforced hind limb deliberately. The servo responded flawlessly. This is adaptation. At the far edge of the plateau, a small human vessel settled quietly beyond the crowd. Adrian did not approach. He leaned against the hull, watching. This was not his speech to give. Kerith continued. A human refused to leave me in the ash. That word carried weight now. Human. Some dragons bristled. Others listened more carefully. He did not repair what was broken, she said. He built around it. She looked directly at a young dragon whose wing had never fully developed. You are not useless, she said firmly. You are unfinished. The hatchling's breath caught. Murmurs grew stronger. Hope is louder than fear when it begins to spread. The council could not ignore it any longer. By sunset, High Marshal Dovarik himself arrived on the plateau with a contingent of armored guards. He surveyed the gathering. Hundreds now. Not soldiers. Citizens. Dragons the Empire had quietly set aside. You undermine order, Dovarik said sharply. Kerith faced him without lowering her head. I expose weakness. His eyes narrowed. In tradition. In thinking. She stepped closer. The mechanical limbs moved with quiet precision. You removed me to prevent visible imperfection, she said. Yet imperfection remained. Hidden. The gathered dragon stood taller. You fear reliance on alien technology, Dovarik continued. You invite dependency. Kerith's gaze shifted briefly toward Adrian in the distance. He gave no signal. No encouragement. Just watched. I do not invite dependency, she replied calmly. I invite collaboration. The word landed differently. Not submission. Not surrender. Collaboration. You would entangle the Empire with humans? Dovarik asked. Kerith held his stare. They already demonstrated what we refused to attempt. A long pause stretched between them. Finally, Dovarik asked the question beneath all others. Why would a human invest resources in a broken dragon? Kerith did not hesitate. Because he did not measure worth by utility. The plateau fell silent. Dovarik looked toward the human vessel, then back at her. What does he demand? Kerith's voice softened slightly. Nothing. That answer unsettled him more than any threat could have. Adrian approached only when she signaled. He walked calmly through a sea of towering dragons. No armor. No weapon. Just tools at his belt. Dovarik regarded him with open skepticism. You altered a dragon, the marshal said. I assisted one, Adrian corrected. You risked diplomatic fracture. Adrian shrugged lightly. Worth it. Dovarik studied him carefully. You expect compensation. No. You expect alliance. No. The marshal's voice sharpened. Then why? Adrian looked up at Kerith first. Then back at the gathered dragons. Because leaving her there would have been wrong. The simplicity of it silenced the entire plateau. He continued, voice steady. You built an empire around strength. He gestured lightly toward Kerith's mechanical frame. I built around potential. A breeze swept across the plateau, carrying ash into the distance. Dovarik looked at the hundreds gathered. He saw something dangerous. Not rebellion. Not defiance. Momentum. Traditions older than the capital itself trembled under a single undeniable truth. Strength had evolved. Finally, the High Marshal spoke. The Council will review policy regarding decommissioned individuals. It wasn't an apology. But it was a beginning. Kerith inclined her head slightly. Not in submission. In acknowledgement. Months later, the Eastern Plateau no longer held only outcasts. It held workshops. Training structures. Assistive engineering bays. Dragon-human collaboration units. Exoskeletal frames of different designs moved across volcanic stone. Wing stabilizers. Flame core regulators. Mobility harnesses. Not replacements. Enhancements. The Empire did not collapse. It adapted. Kareth stood at the edge of the plateau as sunset bathed the capital in molten gold. Adrian stood beside her. "You didn't just come back," he said quietly. "You changed it." She looked toward the horizon where ash once claimed her as forgotten. "You changed it," she corrected. He shook his head. "No." He glanced up at her towering frame. "I just refused to leave." She watched dragons in modified harnesses practice flight stabilization drills. Watched hatchlings born different no longer hidden from public view. Watched veterans regain purpose. The Empire had once believed strength meant perfection. Humanity showed them something more dangerous. Strength meant refusing to leave someone behind. Kareth spread her wings slowly. The mechanical frame adjusted seamlessly. The sky above Pyrathar opened wide. She launched upward with controlled power. Not to prove she could. Not to defy the Council. But because she chose to. And across the Empire, one truth settled like fire into stone. The impossible was never about metal. It was about who stays when everyone else walks away.